Among the dissident right, the writings of Curtis Yarvin, aka Mencius Moldbug, have been rather influential, particularly his popularization of earlier political thinkers like James Burnham and the earlier Italian elite theorists. This culminates in his idea of the Cathedral, which is similar to James Burnham's idea of the Managerial State. In both theories, the state doesn't function in a classical sense, where the king or president functions as an executive alongside a representative assembly who puts forward legislation, which will be enforced directly through the legal apparatuses of the court and police. Rather, what we have now is a Patriarch system with different spheres, all largely controlled by a managerial class in business, academia, and the government, operating independently but in unison. This managerial elite are themselves the products of progressive university education and upper middle class aspirationalism. The result is a largely spontaneously directed system where Yale agrees with Harvard, which agrees with the Department of Urban Development, which agrees with the Air Force, which in turn agrees with NBC, which agrees with Coca-Cola, Goldman Sachs, Procter & Gamble. There's no word coming out of the Kremlin, so to speak, directing all party apparatchiks to toe the line. It's a self-sustaining system, which Moldbug calls the Cathedral. There's a lot of veracity to what both he and Burnham outline, yet is this the whole story? Are there indeed no people behind the scenes, so to speak, making things happen, and who at the very least helped construct and financially back the current system we live under now? The other day, my wife and I watched Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut for the first time. I had always kind of written this off as some sort of racy psychological thriller and didn't really ever pay much particular interest to it. However, through the influence of Jay Dyer's film analysis and globalist book series, I decided that it was high time I see what all the fuss was about. What I found intrigued and lined up with certain other bizarre cases involving various billionaires and power players that have become public over the years. If you haven't seen the movie yet, this is your spoiler warning, and I definitely encourage you, if you're a mature audience member that is, to go and watch this film yourself before seeing this video. For the rest of us, we'll continue. Eyes Wide Shut was Stanley Kubrick's last film he made before dying of a heart attack during post-production of the movie. The main characters are Bill Hartford and his wife, Alice, played by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. They're in a sexually unfilling marriage where the spark has gone out between the two of them. Dr. Hartford and his wife are invited to one of his wealthy patients' Christmas parties where both separate for a time and are sexually tempted by different party goers. Dr. Hartford is then called up to the host's bathroom where the half-dressed host, named Victor Ziegler, is with an overdosed prostitute he'd been having sex with. Dr. Hartford makes sure she's okay before being asked to keep discretion and then returning home. After returning home, his wife divulges some disturbing things about the sexual integrity of their marriage, where she admits she would have cheated on him in the past if she'd been given the chance with a certain man. Disturbed and angered by this, he's summoned to make a house call on a patient who has passed. Upon arrival, the grieving daughter claims to love Dr. Hartford, kisses him, and desires to have sex with him. Tempted, Dr. Hartford declines. Brooding on his wife's marital misfortunes and missed chance of sexual gratification, he approaches a hooker named Domino. Feeling out of place in her apartment, he waits for Domino to initiate sex with him, but gets a call from his wife asking when he'll be home. This makes him lose his nerve, and he leaves Domino paid but unserviced. Walking down the street, he spots a nightclub where an old university friend and pianist extraordinaire, Nick Nightingale, is playing. He had seen Nick earlier in the film playing piano at Ziegler's party and is excited to talk to him. While having a drink, Nick receives a call from an anonymous person summoning him for a later event that evening. Nick responds in the affirmative and writes down the word Fidelio on a napkin, which proves to be the password for entry to some undisclosed location. Bill Hartford wants to go where Nick is going, but Nick says that would be impossible. Yet after pressuring Nick, he's able to get the address and password, and promises to arrive separate from Nick, who is going to be playing blindfolded at the event. However, Dr. Hartford first must get a costume and a mask. In the middle of the night, he goes to a costume store owned and operated by some Eastern European guy who opens the shop for him past midnight for an extra fee. Within the shop, Dr. Hartford finds a young girl in hiding, having been engaging in cross-dressing sex with two Japanese businessmen. She rushes out and whispers in Dr. Hartford's ear that he will need an ermine cloak. Apparently angered that his underage daughter is having sex with these men, the costume owner locks them in a room, claiming he'll call the police, and finishes his business with the disturbed Dr. Harford, who leaves in a cab. The taxi takes him to upstate New York, far outside the city, where he dons his mask, pays the driver to wait outside, and enters the estate with the password Fidelio. What awaits him inside is beyond his imagining. Inside a palatial manor house, Dr. Harford finds hundreds of masked individuals participating in some occult sexual rite. He's selected as an initiate, but his identity is compromised. One of the women selected to perform sex acts, the ritual, seems to know Dr. Harford and warns him before his discovery. Once found out, Dr. Harford is brought before the leader of the rite, demasked and ordered to take his clothes off. However, the woman who warns him earlier offers to take his place in a sacrificial sense, allowing him to leave unscathed. Dr. Harford discovers that the woman who gave herself in his stead last night was the prostitute who overdosed at Victor Ziegler's party the night before, and the next morning turns up dead in the obituaries from an apparent overdose. He also learns that his pianist friend, Nick, who played blindfolded at the event, has gone missing as well. Adding to the uncanniness, Dr. Harford returns to the costume shop, where he discovers that the owner is actively pimping his supposed daughter, and child sex traffic is strongly implied with elite clientele. Dr. Harford's efforts to learn more about this organization are stymied as he is followed across the city. Our main character is then contacted by his wealthy patient from earlier in the movie, Victor Ziegler. Ziegler admits that he was at the event, and many powerful people are part of this organization as well. He tries to convince Dr. Harford to cease his inquiries and downplaying some of the more disturbing aspects of the group, leaving Dr. Harford unsettled and unconvinced. The film ends with Dr. Harford returning to his wife Alice, confiding everything in her. To an extent, they're able to repair their strained marital relations, agreeing that they're both now awake, which is the most important thing. Eyes Wide Shut is a type of surrealist psychological drama with themes of desire, temptation, and the struggles of maintaining marital fidelity. However, secret societies and the indiscretions of the elite play a very prominent, perhaps primary, role in the film. Due to his status in Hollywood, Kubrick would have doubtless been aware of these goings-on at the highest levels of society, and I believe Kubrick was providing a peek behind the curtain in his final film, Eyes Wide Shut. This may seem like a bit of a stretch, but with the revealed media stories over the past few decades, it's hard to ignore the implications of sexual impropriety, secret societies, and even child predation among certain circles of the global elite. Someone who's done a lot of work on this in recent years is author Jay Dyer, whose esoteric analysis of Eyes Wide Shut I highly recommend, and you can find linked in the show notes below. Some examples of what he brings up I'll briefly summarize here. Pertaining to explicit occultic imagery in the film, we find there is at least one instance of an inverted pentagram early on in Dr. Ziegler's home. The chant at the masked sexual rite depicted in the film is a Romanian Orthodox chant played in reverse, functioning as a kind of satanic inversion of the sacred. The sexually exploited girl in the costume shop whispers in Doctor's ear that he'll need an ermine cloak, a piece of clothing directly associated with European nobility, leaving little room to doubt that the ritualistic orgy Dr. Harford witnesses is linked to a degenerated aristocratic class. The orgy is presided over by a European individual with a golden mask and dressed in a manner similar to a cardinal, indicating a type of religious significance to the events of the evening, and his throne is topped by a double-headed eagle, a symbol directly associated with Freemasonry. The double-headed eagle, of course, is an ancient symbol appropriated by many cultures. In Christendom, it signifies the empire and the church as being in union under God. But within the context of Eyes Wide Shut, I think we can clearly disregard this interpretation. The real-world examples of bizarre rituals being carried out by global elites and their sexual improprieties are at this point easy to find. Perhaps the most notorious example to people at present is former billionaire and pedophile sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, who would routinely fly the rich and prominent to his island, where they would allegedly engage in sex acts with the young and had constructed, among other things, a bizarre temple-looking structure. Whether or not this structure was used for any explicit ritualistic purposes, though, is unknown. Famously, Epstein died while in police custody and waiting to take the stand under extremely strange circumstances. But there are other examples as well. Epstein is not just one data point. Former head of the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, has admitted to engaging in sexual orgies on numerous occasions, which included, from one of the witnesses, apparently, quote, brutal anal sex, which wasn't entirely consensual. In Belgium, there was the famous case of Marc Dutroux, who kidnapped, raped, and killed young girls with his accomplice, Bernard Weinstein, who would himself later be killed by Dutroux. Dutroux would also film his crimes along with other perpetrators. Apart from the heinous nature of the crimes, the real scandal was that the judge on the case, Jean-Marc Cunrot, was on the verge of disclosing the names of a number of high-profile government officials taped by Dutroux performing sex acts on children. Further, the judge stated that prominent Belgian businessman Michael Nehul was the mastermind behind the child kidnapping and trafficking, with Dutroux functioning as a facilitator. However, before he could go public with the evidence, he was removed from the case along with certain police officers. To make the situation even more scandalous, more than 20 potential witnesses to the case died within the span of 5 years, some of them under extremely suspicious circumstances. There was even a bizarre link between accomplice Bernard Weinstein and a cult named Abraxas via a letter found in Weinstein's home from the cult, which alluded to young girls and women being available for sex. A less heinous example of sexual deviancy involving the elite was in the United States with Democrat representative and open homosexual Barney Frank. Frank was, quote, stunned after it was discovered that his home at Capitol Hill was being used for male prostitution and servicing who knows what kind of clients. Another example of the American elite being implicated in this sort of thing is the Bohemian Grove. Richard Nixon, in his privately recorded and now openly available tapes, is quoted as saying the following: "The Bohemian Grove, which I attend from time to time, it is the most faggy goddamned thing you could ever imagine." End quote. Apart from the allegedly erotic nature of the club, it has been known to conduct bizarre, esoteric ceremonies, as made famous by Alec Jones in 2000, where he infiltrated and filmed a ceremony at Bohemian Grove with cameraman Mike Hansen. At this point, you may be asking yourselves, okay, all this stuff is weird, but what does any of this have to do with Moldbug and the Cathedral, as you mentioned earlier? The answer to that is the very people within these secret societies and who are implicated in participating in these rituals and sexual improprieties are themselves the functionaries, department heads, patrons, and defenders of what we call the Cathedral. The modern managerial state does function in a somewhat decentralized system, as stated before. However, to suppose that's all we're up against would be to miss the mark, I believe. It's evident from what we know to be facts, not mere speculation, that many of the world's most powerful elite have a penchant for sexual deviancy and are often party to societies with fairly explicit occult overtones. On top of that, and secret societies aside, we have other open organizations like UNESCO staffed by the same caliber of people. In the founding charter of UNESCO, Julian Huxley advocates the creation of a world order which is neither capitalist nor socialist, but a dialectic synthesis of the two. One could credibly say this has already largely been achieved with the overt union of the state and enterprise under the auspices of what's colloquially called global homo. The state is a partner to mega corporations who benefit from its protection and the fruits of central banking at the expense of small enterprise. The state, for their part, benefits from the expertise of these corporations and is able to outsource certain functions of the state, certain functions which, if they were to do themselves, would be deemed unconstitutional. The cathedral or managerial state, whatever you want to call it, are enormous problems to try and overcome. But beyond the level of bureaucrats, NGOs, and college professors are a class of people apart who do not share the values and faiths of the traditional societies they inhabit. To argue that the construction of the current power structure is either the cathedral or a shadowy elite is a needless dichotomy. The cathedral may well function as advertised, but it didn't just breathe itself into being. And the same elites and their descendants who helped aid in its construction are the same type of people fighting for its maintenance today. This has been Mr. Patriarch. If you've enjoyed this video, the best thing you can do to help me out is subscribe if you haven't already. Also, like and comment and share with somebody who you think could benefit from this material. I have also recently started a channel on Odyssey, which I would encourage all of you to subscribe to. The link can be found in the show notes description. It functions as a backup for this YouTube channel. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Patriarch out.